this is Mr. West Ross's Moustache, and today we're looking about whether we agree with Lawrence Wright's interpretation. Obviously, this is the green pen video, so what you need to do is have a look through the video, look at the targets that you've been given, and then improve them in green pen. And as I say, it's that interpretation there. How far do you agree? Right, let's get into it. Okay, so the black target is to include quotes from the interpretation. Okay, and that's the key phrase really. So what you should look to do when you get an interpretation like this is go through and do this now on your copy. You don't have to do it in green pen if you wanted to, or a highlighter. Go through and just highlight the key bits that you'd want to get in your answer. Now then, what I've done is I've highlighted these 4 pieces here of the text that I want to get in my answer. And then what I've done is they're the main points that have been made. And then what I'll do is I'll look through my answer and make sure I've got all 4 of these in. So if you've got black as a target, then your challenge is to get these 4 quotes into your answer somewhere using green pen. So maybe that you put like a little star, black 1 or whatever, or you can try and use phrases like this links to the interpretation when it says. Okay, so this links the interpretation when it's said. Okay, now quite often the top one here, if it wasn't for Bin Laden, we wouldn't be Al Qaeda. That was quite well quoted. Okay, but further down we've got this point here about taking over their own countries. Before Bin Laden, the fundamental radical Islamic groups were focusing on taking over their own countries and not necessarily going and attacking other countries. And that's perhaps how Bin Laden changed things. Okay. So try and get particular bits that have underlined there wouldn't be an Al-Qaeda taking over their own countries. And again, it's Bin Laden who has the imagination to unite radical Muslim groups and get all of them to turn their attention to America and the West. So getting people to have a common goal. So again, try and get these in. It wouldn't be the globally threatening anti-West terrorist threat that we have today. So all these quotes, really, they all agree. Okay, these all are all, you want to be putting these in the agree section, okay, of in the agree section, okay. So have a look back at your agree, the bit that you've written that agrees with the interpretation, or maybe your introduction, and make sure now that you've got all 4 of these quotes in your answer, okay. So you've got the 4 that are here, make sure you've got them all 1, 2, 3, 4. You've got all 4 of them in your answer. When you've done that, move on to your next target. Okay, so now we're on to the blue target, and it's including more historical evidence that backs up the points and the strengths of the interpretation. So when you're saying, I agree with the interpretation, then what evidence have you got? Now, what you can see I've also done here is I've brought in 2 of the quotes that we've been talking about in the black section. So I've also linked them directly to the interpretation. So what I've got on this side is I've got 3 pieces of evidence over here, okay, which are information that you'd want to include, all that agrees that Bin Laden, without him, there wouldn't have been a 9/11, okay? And on this side over here, what I've done on this bit over here is to say, right, how would you explain that? So first of all, what I would look to do is if you've not got anything that agrees, then obviously you're looking to do probably all 3. But if you've already got some evidence that agrees, look through for the ones you haven't got, or maybe the ones that aren't explained as well. Okay, Bin Laden formed and funded Al Qaeda. Okay, he and his wealth to attract recruits, particularly in the Sudan. Now the wealth bit, okay, was quite widely quoted on the assessment, so that's good. But then the idea that it wouldn't have existed had Bin Laden not created it. He was very wealthy, and without his charismatic leadership, anti-American fundamentalists would not have had a voice. So because he had the money and the charisma, he was able to unite lots of different people who didn't like America and give them a goal, give them an aim, okay? So try and include that in your answer about the aim and the goal. Secondly, and a few of you mentioned this, there was the number of bombings, unfortunately, the embassies of Kenya and Tanzania. And the idea is that because these went well, it showed Bin Laden that actually the impact a well-planned suicide attack could have. Yes, you'd obviously lose 1 or 2 people on your own side, but you could have a massive impact, 224 people on the other side, okay? And that then led Bin Laden to try and think about targeting America directly using the same policy. That's what you're going to try and make the link, that it's the same policy. What worked on these US embassies was then going to work again on the attacks on America. And obviously, it wouldn't have been the globally threatened anti-West terrorist threat after this. That links directly to the interpretation. Okay. And then finally, and again, people mention this quite well, that he planned 9/11 and got 19 terrorists, okay? And without bin Laden's charismatic leadership and plan, it's unlikely these terrorists would have been willing and able to carry out the attack. Those are two key phrases I want you to write in your answer: willing and able. No, they wanted to do it, and they had the ability to do it. They wanted to do it because bin Laden had convinced them that it was the right thing to do, and they were able to do it because he'd funded their pilot training, and he'd got them in a position where they could carry out the attack. And again, that links to the imagination that's mentioned in the interpretation. So look back over the page, you've got blue, and then get a number of these written into your answer. Okay, so move on to the red target, okay? We're looking at the weaknesses of the interpretation, so why you don't agree with it. Now, as a rule, in this question, people have got a lot of evidence that agrees with the interpretation, okay, the blue target. That tends to be done well. If one of the blue or red ones done well, it tends to be the blue one. So a number of you might have got blue done well, and I've got red as a target. So let's have a little bit of a look, okay? So I've got on this side here 3 key bits of information that we've looked at that are reasons why, that are evidence that disagrees with the interpretation. And then I've obviously explained the impact of that on the other side here. So if you've not done anything that disagrees, you should be looking to do 2 or 3 of these. If you have, obviously make sure that you don't redo one you've already done. Okay, the British and the UN, with the backing of the USA, organised the formation of Israel in the Middle East, a country that once been Palestine. And that upset all of the Arab world, okay? And it created a pool of anti-West sentiment. And it created the thousands of other potential bin Ladens. And it's that last point, that last sentence there, that's really important. The actions of America and Britain and the UN in creating Israel created a huge amount of discontent amongst Muslims, and that created the potential for thousands of different bin Ladens. Okay, so that's the first one. Then we've also got Utub, who wrote the influential books, okay? And if it wasn't for Islamic academics like Utub, then maybe bin Laden would not have become an Islamic fundamentalist. Okay, remember, we know from bin Laden's background that actually he was a relatively normal child. He was interested in lots of things, football, picnics and the like, not necessarily in this kind of idea, but maybe it's the reading and teachings of people like Utub who then inspire other people to come forward and to join and to become more extreme in their views. People like bin Laden. So maybe nobody would have been in that position if it wasn't for academics like him. And then finally, the US promised to leave Saudi Arabia after Iraq was defeated, but they still have army bases there now, okay? And the actions of the USA infuriated the whole Arab world, a bit like these 2 linked, the first and the third one. Even if Osama bin Laden did not exist, and someone else might have taken up the mantle and created a terrorist plot because of the actions of America when they attacked Iraq and in leaving their bases in Saudi Arabia. So what I would do is I'd look to get at least 2 of the points off here into your answer, okay, and take from the left and the right together and explain how that disagrees, okay? And often it's the last part of the sentences on the right that help you to do that. Okay, so the pink target then, I don't have a pink colour, so I use yellow, because that's nothing like it, but anyway, was to write a conclusion saying how far you agree with the interpretation. I'm referring to key evidence. So what I've done here is I've provided you with a number of sentence starters that you may want to use to try and improve or write a conclusion in the first place. Now, people seem to largely agree, I'll be honest with you, with the interpretation, but obviously if you disagree, tell me why that was, first of all. Why do you largely agree? What is it? Is there anything in particular that makes you agree? Is there one piece of evidence about bin Laden that makes you agree, or one piece that makes you disagree? Yeah, thus bin Laden was fundamental to. Try and explain what he was fundamental to. And what I've also done here at the bottom bit, which links a little bit with the black target, is I've picked a couple of sentence starters that maybe would help you explain why you agree based on these 4 quotes. So it might be that you can do the top one, the quote that you most agree with. Choose one of those 4 and explain why it's that element of the interpretation that you most agree with, okay? And obviously, if there's anything that you find hard to agree, maybe there's anything of these 4 that you find hard to agree, again, engage with that. What I would say is, if you haven't written a conclusion at all, start from the top. If you have written a conclusion, then maybe it's these 2 bottom ones here, okay? that you really want to engage with. And I've put some of the quotes there for you as well. So as I go, rewrite your conclusion or write it for the first time. Okay, so this is a really interesting target, the Navy one, okay? And that's to use more historical terminology and impressive vocabulary, all right? So what I've done is I've been onto the Quizlet and I've taken a couple of screenshots of keywords with the definitions next to them. And basically, if you've got this target, what I would like you to do is to get all of these terms into your answer. Now, it might be that you can add them in. So if you've been writing about something, you might be able to add in to it, or you might have to write a little bit of a small section to go with it, okay? But these should be, all 11 of them should be in your answer by the time you finish the Navy target, and you should be trying to show where they fit into your answer, okay? As I say, if you've already written about, for example, if you've already written about Osama bin Laden had the money, but you might not have used financed, it might be easy. Just cross out the money. Also, Bin Laden had the money for 9/11 and put financed in. But you might not have written about the situation in Afghanistan and with the Mujahideen. So that might be something that you have to write completely new. All right? So have a look through. Either cross out words you've used and replace them with these, or write them in for the first time. Okay, now on this exclusive video, we've been very fortunate to be joined by Mr. Otway, who's been a little bit upset about some of the literacy being used on this piece of work, and he's vented it really in the form of this incredible video, which I'll now be able to play for you live as I'm making the video, which shows an incredible level of ICT skills. And yeah, it's always great to get Mr. Otway into the video, and here he is, and he's not very happy about some use of language. So have a listen to him, and then we'll have a chat about it.
If you have written would have, could have, or should have, I'm going to find you. I'm going to hunt you down. It will be the end of you. Don't. It's would have, could have, should have!
So you can see Mr. Otway there, pretty annoyed, all right? So make sure you haven't upset him there, and then we'll be laughing.